It wouldn't be an account, but it was pretty good.
Greetings once again with the Oral History microphone, and we're visiting today in the city of Hardin. And we're pleased to be in the home of Geraldine Putnam Lents, fourth in commerce officially.
That's right.
In the way they're listing it now. Geraldine, thanks for allowing us to come and visit you today, and we'll start off by asking you if you're old enough to be on the program.
I think so. I think I would qualify very well.
Okay. And were you born in Hardin?
Yes, I was. Actually, right down in the next corner. I mean, across from the Methodist Church. Used to be Methodist Church.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right down on the, well, it was on 4th Street, what they call 4th Street now.
Well, I remember your dad and mother, but tell us who they were.
Well, my daddy was J.M. Putman. Of course, he was always known as Betty Putman.
Mm-hmm.
And mother was Ella Putman. She was a Jones. Her daddy was Alfred Jones. And they were both reared out around, well, it wasn't quite at the Brewers community, but my grandfather had a pile of land out there, which was started, they came here. I believe his daddy was James C. Jones, my great-grandfather. And he came here when he was 18 years old, and he was born in 1793, so you know he was rather...
Oh,
yes, that was many years ago when he came. And of course, at the time that they settled this, they settled it then, just you could take so much land and settled it. It wasn't in Marshall County at the time, it was Callaway County.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's true. And it didn't become Marshall till 1842.
No, that's right. And my daddy's parents were out around Oak Grove. And many people now probably hear of the Putman Woods out there,
mm-hmm.
where a lot of people like to go squirrel hunting. And that was my father's.
The Putmans are a rather famous family in American history. General Israel Putman fought in the Revolution.
Yes, I've always heard my daddy say that we dated back to him.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you, if you were born here, I presume you lived here then most of your life, but you went to school at Hardin?
Yes, I did,
You remember any of your teachers?
Oh, sure. I remember many of my teachers. They were Miss Maylin Annie, Lewis Black, and Beatrice Jones was when I got in higher grades. Miss Hatcher was a high school teacher. I can remember her.
You taught at Murray State later.
Yes, I can remember her so well because Charles Pace used to get up there and put on her coat and hat when she would be teaching school and play the piano. And it happened to be behind her classroom. She couldn't see him, so he would play the piano, pretend he was playing the piano, and of course we would all laugh and out in the auditorium, and she would come out to see and he'd hide behind the piano. So that was the way we went to school and how we were so obedient and learned. That was in the old high school here, when it had the big high school and the auditorium upstairs.
Yes, I well remember that building, which burned in 1937, February, I believe.
I remember one time we had a terrible tornado came through here.
And of course blew off the cupola.
Yes, they did. And we were, I guess they knew at the time how to behave because they put us out in the old hall out in the front and had everybody to get down on their hands and knees. And of course, we thought we was going to be blown away, but it didn't hurt anyone. So,
well, what did you like most in school?
I guess having fun. No, really, I really enjoyed debating. I enjoyed all my subjects. I did better in some than others. But I did have the honor of being on the debating team with Edna Ross, David Booker, and Edward Kellogg, which of course were all well known here. we went to Murray State and won at that time in the district. They began to have all the schools to come to Murray State. That's when Murray University was known as Murray State College.
Yeah.
And we were fortunate enough to win that year.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Great. Now let's see. What year did you finish high school? Was it you were in the class of 34?
Yes. Yes.
I remember now that you headed the golden anniversary class this year.
Yes. We had a very nice time at that. Well, when I went to school, we had sports like we do now. Of course, we didn't have the advantages they have now, but we did play softball. We thought we were really going to foreign places. We went to Golden Pond, we went to Almo, we went to Iola, and that at that time was quite a distance away from Hardin.
And
People can't visualize that, but at the time you did, and even Benton, I can remember very well when Benton was quite a distance from Hardin, and very few people went. And talking about my father, at one time he owned the garage here. I don't recall if it was the first one or not, but I believe it was about the first garage that they had.
he was a new car dealer at one time and sold the Preston.
Yes, he had the Presto, and there was a Bristow. Studebaker, the old Studebaker. It had such big fenders on it. And then he had a T-model Ford. I can remember that very well because my sister and I got in one day to ride around. We didn't know how to stop it. We had to drive it until it ran out of gas, which didn't take too long because it didn't hold the gas that it does now. And I can also remember that my grandmother lived out towards Brewers, and at the time you went out the old Wadesboro Road. And of course they had some rather nice little hills out there.
There was no highway from Hardin to Murray. You went from Wadesboro on the old gravel road.
That's right, but we were going out towards Brewers out that way. And when you went in these cars, if you got a hill high enough, you had to turn around and back up the hill. You couldn't drive up because then I guess they didn't have the carburetors fixed so that it would force the gas in. And the tank was in the back, and of course it would not go up there. So I can remember when we would scotch the car, walk along beside the car, and my brother Henry would be driving it, and we'd drive, and he'd go, and then the car would get so hot you'd have to stop for a few minutes, and we'd put blocks under the car.
I remember those Model Ts until the 26 model. The gas tank was under the seat, and there was no fuel pump. It was gravity feed.
That's right.
So if the hill, as you say, happened to be fairly long, then the only way you could get up it would be to go in reverse.
Yes,
And yes, those are wonderful times.
And I don't know, in your talking to different people, if they ever mentioned, Hardin was quite famous. They had 3 men that worked on the railroad.
Well, I remember all 3 of them, I think.
Yes, and of course we thought that was quite something for to have a conductor, which Mr. Fulton, if you remember, Mahalo Fulton's daddy.
Yeah, married Ed Brown.
Yes, she graduated with me the year I graduated. And her father was the conductor.
He was on the first trip that was made on that road in 1890.
Yes, So that was really something for Hardin. And then
There were 2 mail clerks who lived here.
yes, Mr. Byron Johnson and Mr. Jess Utley, which of course most of the people do know and were well known, and so we thought that was quite something for Hardin. And of course the first Church of Christ that I remember, which I'm a member of, was the old building was built in
About 1907, was it? Somewhere along there?
1907, yes. It was a frame building. I have the picture of that with all the people in it.
About where did that set?
It was sitting in the same location that it is now. Yes, I mean just about there.
Yeah.
And then in 1924, they really built a new one, if you can remember, that had the upstairs and all
Oh,
the
yeah.
extra.
Someone told me that was the first building that the Church of Christ had in the county that was made out of brick.
Well, that's right. The first one was a frame building. Yes. And then this, of course, was brick and quite a lovely building.
Someone once told me a story that when the old high school building burned in 37, that they had school in the Baptist, Methodist, and the Church of Christ buildings. And whoever it was had been put in that building, and they used the balcony, and they would, when the teacher wasn't looking, they'd drop marbles or paper wads or something off on the heads of those down below.
They probably could have done that, and they might have done it sometime in church when they were up there, too. But they did have a large balcony there.
Now, you're talking about the Briscoe. I remember the Briscoe car. It was it was a radical idea, I suppose,
Yes.
but it worked, and I don't know why they didn't keep it in a way, but it had a giant headlight in the middle.
Yes.
And it was hooked up to the steering gear so that when you turned a corner, the lights turned with you. And but nobody uses it now.
No, my father also had a large farm. It's known now as the John Lee Farm up towards Dexter. You went across the old iron bridge and up the road to Dexter. And we used to keep our cattle up there. We had cattle and sold milk. And of an afternoon we would have, we'd get all to help us go up there that could. And then we'd tell them if they'd come back with us, it was a dusty road, and we would ride the cowtails home. We'd get them to running and then ride the cowtails home. And, of course, they always wondered when we got home why the cows didn't give their milk like they should, because
Oh, what children will do. Well, I heard you mention your brother Henry's name a moment ago. How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I only had the one brother, Henry, and then my sisters were Gladys, the older sister, and Fleda and Uda. So, and then, of course, myself.
Well, that made 4 girls and a boy?
That's right.
Yeah. So 5 children. The families generally were bigger back in those days.
That's
than
right, but
most
they,
of them are now.
they are all deceased but myself at the present time. But talking about the milking, at one time, I guess we would have what you'd call a dairy now. We milked 24 cows.
I'd call that a dairy.
And I often said we didn't have a automatic milker, but I was it, because usually of a morning I had run milk 12 or 13 cows before I could go to school. But the fascinating thing was that we took milk to most everybody in town, but people in the trains, we were speaking of trains, and they came out in the trains, and it was so much cheaper here than it was at Paducah that all the men bought their milk from my mother. And they'd buy it in gallon jugs. Then, of course, it didn't have to be pasteurized milk. You could just sell the pure milk, and I always brought it down. And what was so fascinating about it was they let me ride in the engine of the train then.
Oh, I always wanted to do that.
And even till this day, when I pass a train, I wave at the engineer because I just feel close to them because I used to get to ride up there.
Yeah. Now, what was it they called? There was a special that they put on during the Depression. Was it the Doodle Bug?
Oh, yes, the doodle bug. That was the thing. That came late of an afternoon, and of course everybody went and met that doodle bug. You weren't anything at all if you didn't get to town to meet the doodle bug, and everybody met. Young people usually then, after that, walked around the town, but the older people went, and a lot of times they had a restaurant there. Mr. Henry Davenport had one, and you'd go and drink a Coke or something like that. Now, we also had a real nice hotel here. Mr. Harsh Warren had a hotel. And, of course, I don't know if people remember it or not. I'm sure quite a few of the old-timers do, which I call myself now an old-timer. But at one time, we had the only black person that ever lived in Hardin, to my knowledge, that lived in the hotel. Her name was Priss.
Mm-hmm.
And she worked there for them, and she was a lovely, lovely lady. And I just loved to go visit with her because she would, of course, sometimes give you something to eat, and of course I always liked that. But she was a nice person, and to my knowledge, she lived there until she died.
I believe I've heard that, and I remember seeing her.
Yes,
Yeah.
but and then also, I don't know if people remember or not, but at one time we had a jail here in Hardin.
Well, Mr. Warren, by the way, wasn't he
Yes,
chief of
he
police?
was the chief of police, and we had a jail, and it still stands. It's over across from the general store up here on the main part of town, and close to where Dan Black lives there, a little brick building across from it, and it was still there. And of course, we used to have kindly. Then they didn't drive the cars, but they had their horses. And we had a liver stable about a block from town.
The drummers would come in, get off the train, go to the hotel.
Oh, yes.
Then they'd rent a horse and buggy and drive out to Olive.
Oh, yes, different places and see the different places or visit someone. And it was quite an active place. I can remember very well the time that it burned also. It burned one night, and there was 3 other houses there by it that burned. Glenn Edwards' grandparents' house burned at the time. And then people didn't just hear of a fire burning. It was almost like a circus. Everybody.
They all went.
Night or day, you went. This was in the middle of the night, and everybody was there. There wasn't much you could do because you had no fire department, but you went there just to, more or less to see the excitement, I guess.
And, of course, the ones that got there early tried to take
Oh, yes,
some of
they
the
always tried to take
beds
things
and fallen
out.
out.
Yes,
Yeah.
to get everything out that they could.
Well, those are thrilling events, and we want to get back to them a little bit later, but I want to ask you where you met your husband. You married Elwood Lentz?
Yes.
Was he from this area?
Elwood Lentz was raised in Dogtown. I guess most people know we're out of Benton.
Big city between Benton
Yes,
and Hardin.
His mother and daddy was Jeff and Dora Lentz, which were very well known because they were old-timers here in Marshall County.
How did you meet him?
His sister married Glenn Edwards. Hazel married Glenn Edwards. And his daddy passed away, and he came up here and lived with Hazel. And Mr. Kratos and Cooper Edwards, I'm sure you remember them.
I remember both of them.
Yes, they were lovely people. And he lived with them and helped Glenn farm. And he started the school here. And from that time on, why, we went with each other. Of course, sometimes we would go with somebody else, but most of the time we managed to go back to each other. And, of course, then we were rather young when we married. But that's where I married him. Met him here in Hardin.
All right, now, that marriage resulted in some children.
Oh, yes, we had 4 sons. And we have 12 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. And our sons are Mike Lentz, which lives in Benton.
Works the post office.
Yes, he's superintendent of the post office in Murray. And then, of course, our eldest son, Dwayne, lives in Clearwater, Florida, and he works with the Pet Milk Company. Our 3rd son, Dan, he had 20 years with the Coast Guards, an officer in the Coast Guards. He retired, and now he's teaching art in a high school in Versailles, Missouri.
Didn't you have a son that taught history somewhere?
Oh, that's Ronald.
Ronald.
He graduated from, actually he went to Freed Hardeman College in Murray University, and then he went to Carbondale. Now he teaches in Clarksville, Missouri. And he has an antique home there, which he has 22 rooms he has worked on. So they all have their hobbies, and they
Do
all...
they have any children? Do you have grandchildren?
Oh, yes, I have 12 grandchildren.
And they're all, well, now the one in Florida can't come very often, I guess.
He manages to come every 2 years at least, and sometimes they come every year, but every 2 years he comes, and if he doesn't come, we go down there. So we see each other every year, and the other boys, our sons have always been a very close-knit family, and they manage to see each other each year. So sometimes he gets us all down there, too. We go to Florida and visit and all, go to see him if he doesn't come see us.
You don't happen to have a bumper sticker that says, "Let me tell you about my grandchildren."
Well, no.
One of those the other day.
But of course I'm proud of all of them, and we have 3 grandchildren that are married, and Mike's daughter goes to Freed-Hardeman College, Julie. I'm sure quite a few people around here know her. Of course, Andrew is 8 years old. Dan has 5 children, and he has 3 sons and 2 daughters. Dwayne has 3 children. 2 of those are married, and the other is still at home. And Ronald has 2 children. He has a son that has gone about 2.5 years, I believe, at David Lipscomb College in Nashville. And he's planning to go into the Navy in April, I believe, and work on computer work. And then Nancy that will graduate this next year.
You mentioned Mr. Kratos Edwards. I recall his being the song leader and also a barber. He's cut my hair.
Oh, yes. He was a barber until, he was quite old when he quit barbering. But the best thing they were known for was to let you come to their house and bring a cup of sugar and make candy. That's what the kids used to do around here for pastime, and Caddy Brown used to get the parties up, and we would all take a cup of sugar. I heard Wilma Pace say one time that her mother said she almost kept her robbed from sugar, taking a cup of sugar each night to make candy. But Cooper and Kratos was awfully good to let us come down there quite a bit.
So you had fun, even though there was no television or anything.
I really think in those days we had more fun because it was a free fun. I mean, and most of the time you weren't allowed to go like you did now. Of course, we couldn't go. We didn't have cars. But you had to go in groups. And we had play parties. And we had made candy, as I say. And then sometimes you just went to somebody's house and played games.
You ever make popcorn balls?
Well, yes. But it was really hard to make taffy candy. I could never make it. It always got all over the place.
Well, there's a lot of pulling in that.
Yes,
I can.
And I just never could make the taffy candy.
I suppose that you had to cook it just so long, not too little, not too much.
No, that's right. I mean, some people mastered the field, but I didn't. In later years, I worked, which I was very proud of, I worked with the Homemaker Extension Office. And I had the opportunity and the privilege of being on the national and state safety program.
Well, wonderful.
And I enjoyed that very much. I got to go to Puerto Rico and different places with that. So.
What did Elwood do? Did he farm when you first married, or?
Yes, he farmed. He helped Glenn Edwards farm. And then he went into carpenter work. They did carpenter work. But he eventually ended up in the car industry, and he was service manager for quite a few years. We moved to St. Louis, Missouri, and he was service manager. And then he decided that he would enjoy his own business and went into service station work.
Mm-hmm.
And was quite successful at it. He enjoyed it very much.
Now, when you were small, did they have electric lights back then?
Oh, I'm glad you asked about that, because that's one thing I certainly want to talk about if no one else had. I can remember when they only had the lights on one day a week in the daytime for so many hours.
But they did have a light plant.
Yes, Mr. Cox did. Faith Cox had it, and he had the electric lights. Now, they didn't have them on in the daytime at all. They only were turned on about dark at night. But one day a week, he would turn them on so many hours so the women could iron their clothes.
I heard someone say once that Monday was sort of traditional wash day, and that on Tuesday then the electricity came on at noon.
I think that's the way it was, and then they had it on for a couple or 3 hours, and then they could iron. Yes. Uh-huh.
Well, that's great.
Yes.
We depend on it so much now, it's hard to remember when it didn't exist, and yet I can well remember living in the country. In fact, out the Wadesboro Road, as I still call it, we didn't get power there till August of 1947.
I've often hated that they changed the name of the Wadesboro Road. It was very dear to me because I lived on the Wadesboro Road. And
the highway people said they couldn't have every road named Wadesboro Road,
well,
so they named it after
that's
Corbett
right.
Tucker.
So that's all. Well, he was a very nice fellow, so that's all right. But from me, my memories, and I don't know, of course, a lot of times the young people used to go out to the spring, Wadesboro Spring, and build a big bonfire out there. And I can remember when, if you didn't have anything else to eat, sometimes you'd take potatoes out there and build a big bonfire and roast potatoes and eat them.
Well, you know, time goes so fast. We only have 2 minutes left. Now, what do you want to tell us in that last 2 minutes? Do you have anything special?
Well, I think Hardin at one time was a very, very active place. We had a drugstore with a soda fountain in it, and that was up at the corner where the general store is, grocery store is now. And we had of course we have a post office now, but we had it. We had a couple of restaurants, and even at one time we had a saloon here.
And there were 2 rather large department stores.
Oh, very much so, and very modern. I remember Miss Eva Gardner came here.
Was a milliner.
And she was a milliner. She even made the hats. Then you didn't order them. Somebody made them. So, and they had furniture and all the things. One thing, if I had time, I can remember the thing that I really remember is the time that Irby Hurt disappeared.
Unsolved murder. Yeah.
I was, of course, a young girl, and it was the hottest summer I ever remembered. Our pond dried up, and we had to take the cows down to the creek, across the old iron bridge and down to the creek. And I took the cows that morning, and I found out later that the people that they said that took him off passed there 10 minutes before I got there.
Oh, that's scary.
And it was scary. I was afraid to leave my mother's side for a long time after that. Really, I could just think that I might have been in the bottom there with him.
Well, Geraldine Putman Lentz, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all this.
I hope I have told a few things that people will enjoy.
I'm sure you have. This is Ray Mofield speaking. We're in Hardin. We return you now to our studios in Benton.